Power Alliance Finance Committee. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Chair Santangelo,
I'm here.
Committee Member Albrecht.
Present.
I will note that Committee Member Colchar will be absent today. Committee Member Kalaikai,
Present.
Committee Member Zuckerman,
Here.
Committee Member O'Connor, not here yet, and Committee Member Newman.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, everybody. All right. Do we have any general public comments?
We did not receive any request.
Okay, and I don't have any here. Then that will bring us to the consent agenda. We have 4 items on consent today.
Move approval. Kalaikai Claremont.
Seconded.
Great. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Committee Member Kalaikai and a second by Committee Member Newman to approve the consent calendar. Chair Santangelo,
Yes.
Committee Member Albrecht,
Yes.
Committee Member Kalaikai,
Yes.
Committee Member Zuckerman,
Yes.
Committee Member Newman.
Aye.
Thank you. Item passes.
Great. Okay, that brings us to our regular agenda, and we'll start with item 5, which is to receive a report from the independent auditor and review fiscal year 2024-25 financial statements and fiscal year 24-25 budget to actual report.
So first of all, we are very pleased to report that CPA has successfully completed our annual financial audit for fiscal year 24-25. Making our 6 years working with Baker Tilly. For this agenda item, our audit engagement manager, Ryan Tyler, will begin by presenting the audit results and providing an overview of our audit process. And then following Ryan's presentation, there will be a brief breakout section for the auditors to speak with our committee members. And after the breakout section, we will reconvene and Jennifer will present the annual budget to actual financial results. Ryan, you are welcome to log off after your portion of the meeting. So now let's turn it over to Ryan.
Great.
Thanks, Hui. Well, yeah, like Hui said, my name's Ryan Tyler. I'm a senior manager with Baker Tilly, and I'm here to talk about your 2025 audit and how everything went. So if you go to the next slide, please. So what I'll discuss here really is what was covered through the audit. Sometimes it's nice to provide a little bit of background and kind of what the procedures and what the scope of the audit is, our strategy, and ultimately what types of procedures we perform, as well as the results of your audit. I'll talk about some of the required communications that are outlined in the audit results letter, is sometimes referred to as the management letter that you have received, and then as well as future standards that are coming down the line, and then we'll end with some Q&A and a little discussion. So next slide, please. So audit overview. Field work, so the bulk load of our testing was done September 2nd to the 5th, which is 4 days of testing. A lot of planning was done ahead of time, but that's really kind of our final field work and ultimately where a lot of our testing is performed. Management and staff were cooperative and readily available. This really helps from an efficiency standpoint of our audit, kind of move on from testing areas to go to the next, just to have people that are readily available to pounce on questions and kind of keep us moving. The audit was conducted remotely and no difficulties were noted from our end. So next slide, please. So some of our testing methods really go back to we kind of have a risk-based approach. So that's in terms of evaluating, assessing risk. Really what we do is we interview employees, get an understanding of the business, document those processes, and kind of identify what areas or what type of areas we want to spend our time testing. So again, we're going to test a lot of those business processes for weaknesses and adherence to policies. And we also do a statistical sampling approach. So A perfect example of that is purchase power expenses. We're going to get a list of the total invoices for all the purchase power expenses. We're going to not test all of them. We're going to statistically sample a portion of them, and then ultimately view invoices to ensure the invoice was recorded correctly and pertains to the correct period. And next slide, please. We'll go over more testing methods. We also do what's called independent confirmation. So example here is going to be for cash. What we do is we reach out to the third-party financial institute to make sure that their balances from their records agree to, in this case, CPA's records. And finally, another testing method is tracing to source documents. So this is, like I said, with purchase power, we look at various invoices. We may also vouch the contracts for the commitment section of your footnotes, tracing to those source documents to ultimately get some reliance on a lot of our testing. So again, accounts payable, purchase power testing, we're going to look at a lot of those invoices, and then vouching to various contracts, maybe bills if it relates to the AR or revenue side. But ultimately, again, looking at source documentation. And then if you go to the next slide, please. I mentioned this a couple slides ago, but we do review a lot of the control areas. A lot of these sections won't be to any of your surprise, right? We look at disbursements, payroll, billing, cash and investments, ultimately your financial reporting, as well as your information technology. While we review these controls just to identify some risk and where the risk lies within the audit, we do not opine on these controls, but ultimately, again, used for a risk-based assessment process. And if you go to the next slide. Okay, so what we're all here for, what were the results of the audit? Okay, so the audit was performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. The audit objective was to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. This is the highest level of assurance that can be provided. And ultimately, the financial statements of CPA received an unmodified opinion, which is otherwise known as a clean opinion. And also, viewing those controls, there's no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies here. So the last two items are probably the utmost importance. An unmodified opinion, that clean opinion, and then no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identified in your controls. So ultimately, a very clean and efficient audit from our standpoint. If you go to the next slide, please. So furthermore, here's some required communication. We have to outline what our responsibilities are, and one of those requirements is to be independent in both fact and appearance. We also have the responsibility to plan, perform, and audit to obtain reasonable assurance about whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement, which ultimately we opine on. The board or the finance committee's responsibility is to oversee the strategic direction of the organization as well as overall accountability of the entity. We didn't note any significant or unusual transactions during the course of the audit that we're required to communicate to you all. Next up, accounting policies and estimates. Oh, sorry, go back to the previous slide. Yeah, thank you. Accounting policies and estimates. Accounting estimates, as you know, are an integral part to financial statement, and it's based on management's knowledge and experience. In CPA's case, this is unbilled revenue, allowance for doubtful accounts, lease asset and liability, right? So when we talk about an estimate, there's an implied incremental borrowing rate, which determines the principal versus interest payment. I'm not going to bore you with too much detail there, but as part of our audit, we review those accounting estimates that are integral to your statements, and there's been no significant changes to the estimates, and all are to be deemed reasonable. The next one here is Baker Tilly agrees with CPA's accounting policies and disclosures. We ultimately have several different reviews of your financial statements and of completed work papers. There's one at the staff level, a manager, so myself will review it, and a principal will also review disclosures. Ultimately, we agree with the policies and disclosures within your financial statements. There was one change this year, which was resulted from a new GASB standard, or Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB, where GASB statement number 101 was implemented for compensated absences. And essentially what happened here was there was a decrease in threshold from that new standard that CPA ultimately implemented. It didn't have a material impact, but it did adjust that, or it slightly increased the payroll related liability, and will be provided as such in the future. Once again, it was immaterial impact, so CPA was not required to implement this standard as a restatement in their 2024 period. But again, it was implemented in 2025 and will be continued to be implemented in the future. Next, there was no identified adjustments to the financial statements. Again, a clean opinion, no material weaknesses and significant deficiencies, and no identified adjustments to the financial statements when we are ultimately testing. So, and finally here, no audit findings or concerns. So just wanted to highlight how clean of an audit this was. Again, I'm gonna harp on this again, but what we did, no identified adjustments, right? Clean opinion, and no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So ultimately, very efficient process, and again, clean opinion. So if you go to the next slide. So upcoming accounting impacts, GASB has been relatively quiet. I'll knock on wood there. So it has been a little bit refreshing, just because we had multiple GASBs that came down the pipe and previously were implemented by CPA. But two that are upcoming for fiscal year 2026 are GASB 103 and then GASB 104. GASB 103 is financial reporting model improvements. I won't go in a lot of detail here, but essentially this is adding a new section to the income statement. It's also making somewhat improvements to the MD&A to more focus on the why. So look out for that in your fiscal year 2026 financial statements. And again, 104 is the disclosure of certain capital assets. They re-emphasize how to report lease assets in the capital asset footnote. CPA was already doing this, so there won't be any change to your statements, but kind of wanted to make you aware of the 103 and 104, which will be effective next year, next reporting period, I should say. Okay, and then next slide. I just want to close out to say how much we appreciate working with you and your team. It's been great. It's a smooth process. Like I said, very clean from a reporting standpoint. And again, we appreciate all the work that goes into it. I know it's a lot more work than your day-to-day. And again, we appreciate working with you. And with that, any questions or discussion, if you go to the next slide, and maybe the next one too. I do have my contact information here. If you'd like to reach out, feel free to do so. Either give me a call or provide an email.
Thanks so much, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions, comments?
Just congratulations to David and the team, and thank you to Ryan for your good work. Much appreciated.
Madam
David,
Chair,
I'd like to weigh in on that as well. I love the term risk-based that you've been using. That's the term that insurance companies use a lot, because that's an important element. And to ensure and protect risk-based is what you've done. I mean, this is a clean, it's beautiful top to bottom, reliable on all levels, and very, very minimum of reasonable assurance, and maximum above and beyond. So congratulations. This is great. If we could do this every year, that would be a grand slam.
Steve, did I see you waving your hand?
Yeah, it's funny. I'm on a screen here. I'm trying to get out of, but can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, on page 24, there was a note that there would be, some significant quote risks are not looked at, which is certainly understandable. You can't look at everything. But in terms of on page 35, it talks about internal controls. Were there any are there any internal controls that typically you would like to see there that perhaps you didn't see? The reason for that note.
We did not we did not become aware of any control weaknesses at any point. So to answer your question, no, I think all the controls are adequate, especially for considering an entity size. I think everything was what we expected in terms of controls and processes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mhm.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to remind you that we do have the option to move staff into a breakout room for further discussion between the committee and the auditor, if you'd like to proceed with that.
Okay, should we do that now?
We can, yes. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and open the staff breakout room so that all of our staff can join, and then staff here in the room will also depart the room.
Very quickly.
Okay, it looks like all of our staff has moved into a breakout room. So now it is just the committee and the auditors. And then just a friendly reminder that we are live streaming to the public. This is still a public session as well. Thank you.
Okay. So now do we have any comments or questions?
It's hard to find any questions. It's so clean. From
I
top to
know.
bottom.
I agree.
Approach ahead of time, what Clean Power prepared, so Baker Tilly can prove it. Baker Tilly, your reputation precedes yourself, so fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess what comments I will add, I will say the staff at CPA was very helpful in terms of one, getting the requests, and then two, if we had any questions, making sure that it was on time to provide a response. That again, I kind of mentioned that a little bit during the presentation, but it really helps us kind of continue to move forward from an efficiency standpoint, rather than having a delay. Which pushes us back to wait for that response. So ultimately, the staff was very friendly and very time oriented in getting the responses to help us move along in the process.
I mean, ultimately, is there anything that you would recommend that we could do better? Not necessarily that we did wrong, but maybe more efficient or prepare better?
Nothing really jumps out. I think maybe looking at some of the allowance processes. I know there's been some inconsistency in how collections have been posted. So maybe just honing in on that allowance for doubtful accounts and really looking at how it's calculated. I think there has been some back and forth from David and Wei about how that calculation is put together. But I think moving forward, just as more collection data comes in, if you can hone in on that calculation and make sure that's a reasonable estimate. We did review that in detail, and it was reasonable and has been consistently estimated. But I think staying on top of that and making sure that calculation fits the bill, I think makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. David, did you have your hand up?
I did, but Ed asked my question. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So anything else before we wrap this up?
None on my end.
Okay. Well, thanks so much again, Ryan. We really appreciate your work and working with us.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, Madam Chair, at this time, I will bring back all of our CPA staff into the room.
Sounds good.
Then can you look at this?
Welcome back.
Thank you. Staff had a robust discussion about children's Halloween costumes.
You practiced that line.
Okay, so I guess we're on to the next part of this.
Great. Hi, I'm Jennifer Stevenson. I'm the Financial Planning and Analysis Manager here at CPA. And I'm here to present the financial results from the audited financial statements. Next slide, please. As you just heard, we received a clean audit opinion. We've increased our net position by $137 million this year and the liquidity by $107 million. We ended the year with days liquidity on hand at 180 days and the reserve percentage at 45%. CPA's financial results for the year were impacted by a decrease in retail rates from March 2025 and milder weather conditions than budgeted, lower than budgeted market energy prices, and an increase in investments and favorable interest rates, which improved our overall interest income. CPA was within budget limits for all budget expense line items. Next slide, please. Let's start by looking year over year at the balance sheet. So here we have the assets. If you were just to look at row 1, it would look like our cash went down year over year. It's important to also take into account our investments. Row 2 is our current investments, and row 12 is our long-term investments. As you can see on row 12, we made $174 million worth of long-term investments. So our available cash year over year, which is the sum of those 3 rows, increased from $394 million to $541 million. On row 3, you'll see our accounts receivable net of an allowance for uncollectible accounts, also known as the bad debt reserve. This decreased by $46 million year over year. Part of the reason for that is that there was an observed delinquency behavior in our residential customers, and collections activity by our billing and collection agent SCE did not make up for that. So we had to reserve additional reserves for active residential accounts. Next slide, please. Here we see our liabilities. There's no major changes year over year other than row 16. In row 16, we see the accrued cost of electricity. This is an amount that at the end of the year, if we haven't been invoiced for electricity that we know we've received or RA or REX, then we accrue the expected amount that we'll pay. So last year we had a supplier who didn't invoice us timely, and so we had to accrue a pretty large amount. This year that wasn't the case. We were more in line with our usual accrued cost of electricity. So that has nothing to do with our actual expense for electricity for the year. It's just the timing of the payment. Next slide, please. And at the bottom of our balance sheet, you can see there was no addition to the fiscal stabilization fund, and our net position increased by $137 million. Next slide, please. All right. Here we have a lot of financial indicators. These are ratios that we track so that we can keep track of the health of the organization. I won't go through them all, though I'm happy to answer questions here or later via email as well. But I did want to point out the working capital and unrestricted cash decreased year over year, as we just discussed, because we made investments with some of the cash. And then the days liquidity on hand, which is a pretty important financial indicator for us, it increased from 158 to 180 days as a result of the increase in cash, and our total liquidity offset by a reduction in the bank line of credit of 160 million to 120 million. So what I'm saying here is that we brought more cash in, but we also, our available line of credit decreased by 40 million. And so days liquidity on hand takes both of those into account. So even though we decreased that line of credit, we still came in at 180 days. Next slide. Great. So now we're moving to the income statement to look at budget versus actual for the year. So in terms of operating revenues, we were 9% under budget. This is due to the decrease in retail rates from March and the milder weather conditions because those reduced electricity consumption and therefore revenues. Our other revenues line, that just arises from funding from the CPUC to offset our power share program costs. Next slide, please. In terms of energy costs, we were 8% lower than budgeted. We did not use the contingencies, and the mild weather also contributed to that because less load needed to be purchased. We also saw lower than budgeted market prices in FY 24-25. Row 7 shows our net operating revenues, which were $26 million or 14% lower than budgeted, which is expected due to the interim rate change from March. Next slide, please. On to operating expenditures. We were 17 million under budget, 25%, due to the non-utilization of contingencies and delayed timing of expense incurrences for customer programs. CPA was within budget for all budget expense line items. I think that's the second time we said it. We really want you to know. Next slide, please. In terms of non-operating revenues and other non-operating revenues, our interest income exceeded the budget due to increases in investments and cash balances in high interest earning accounts. And the change in net position was 3% higher than budgeted by $4 million. Next slide. That's all my slides for today. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address them.
Question?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Jennifer. That was very enlightening. I guess I have just two questions. They're fairly specific. If you don't have the numbers, that's fine. You can give me the answers at another time. On page 42, it talks about a claim. Are you free to talk about the amount of that claim and what it's for? It's a claim that's not identified.
Sorry, which is this in the presentation or in the
the agenda? Yeah, I'm sorry. Page 42 in the agenda.
Okay. Just bring that up so I can see.
Hi, Steve. It's Nancy as well. I'm looking at this.
Okay.
Can you, Annie, can you bring that up? Let's see. Steve, I would advise that we not talk about this in open session.
Okay, that I understand that completely. Thank you. Then one other question that, hopefully we can, and if we can, it's not an issue either at all. But there was a canceled power purchase agreement that is referred to, I think, on page 63 of the agenda. And I'd just like some background on that to the degree that you can provide it, the amount especially.
Sorry, Steve, what page did you say?
Ted, I believe it's page 63.
Great.
It's the cancellation of a long-term power purchase agreement prior to construction.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, that was reported in to the board. It was the Shalon project. It was about 60 megawatts of solar and 40 megawatts of battery. And as David noted, it was canceled prior to commencement of construction. That developer came back with a request for a second price increase, and we said no and exercised the right to terminate.
Okay. And so that reduced our liabilities, correct?
Well, not liabilities. It reduced our contract commitments.
Okay. So in terms of the impact on the balance sheet, where
None.
None. Okay. That's what I need to know.
Okay.
Oh, what was the amount involved?
The dollar amount of the commitments of that power purchase agreement.
Right.
We'd have to,
much?
unless Ted knows offhand, we'd have to, or Matt, we'll have to get back to you offline about that.
Okay. If that's not top of mind, that's fine. I'm just, yeah. Don't need to do that. You've got enough to do. Just one other comment. It's really not a question. It's just kind of a comment, I guess. When this is presented to the board, it seems like there are a couple kind of overriding things that do impact these statements. One is the fact that, and it is shown throughout the presentation here, but it seems like the fact that we did not add anything to our fiscal stabilization, that had a big impact in terms of comparing this year to prior year. Is that something that, and the adjustment to accounts receivable, those seem to be the two biggest items that reflect the statements between the 2 years. Is that something that you could kind of pull out just so that it makes it easy for board members to understand the impact of those two items? And I think that'll allow them maybe to read the financial statements more easily. A related question, I guess, is should we show at this point, because we've done it in the past, aged accounts receivable, because again, we've changed our allowance for past due accounts. What are your feelings on that, David?
So we plan to provide the Finance Committee with an update on our accounts receivable, which would include that information. We'll do that separately,
Okay.
probably in February, once we gather a little bit more information. We don't usually provide that information as part of the financial statement presentation.
Right. I understand. Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, in light of the question that Member Zuckerman had, is it appropriate to have a brief closed session agendized in the future for either the committee or the board to better understand the item that he was asking about that clearly is a matter of litigation?
We can certainly schedule that. It would not be inappropriate. It has been the subject matter of a closed session in the past.
Okay.
So we can so it isn't this will not be a surprise, but if the Finance Committee is interested in having a status update, we can certainly schedule that.
Yeah, maybe just a refresher in the context of what we're doing. It probably is a good idea.
Yes.
If other members don't disagree with that, so.
Yes, we can certainly schedule that, but I want to assure the Finance Committee that this is not new. It's not a surprise. This is something that has been discussed in the past. So, but yes, the short answer to that is yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Great. Okay. Are there any other comments, concerns, questions about this item? All right, I don't think we have any action for this item, just to receive and file.
That's correct.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'd just like to tell staff, thank you so much for working with Baker Tilly and working with them to get this audit done, and congratulations. Really are great results.
Thank you. A big thank you goes to Wei Lasano, who heads up our accounting area and works directly with the auditors and her outstanding accounting team.
Great. Thank you, Wei. All right, that will bring us to item 6. Who is handling this one, David?
Kate Freeman will be handling.
Kate's here.
Yeah, the prepaid presentation.
All right, take it away, Kate.
Great. Thank you. Nice to see everyone again. I know we spoke about prepays last month, so today's presentation will be focusing less on our background of what we've done with prepays so far, and focus more on the what we want to do in the future, the how we're going to do it, and then, of course, our requested action for you guys, which is to make some recommendations on our behalf to the board. So with that, let's dive into it. So we are requesting your recommendation on two fronts here. So the first is to recommend that the board at its November meeting approve us to complete up to 4.5 billion of new prepaid transactions using any of Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Royal Bank of Canada, or JP Morgan as our underwriter and prepaid supplier. There's kind of a secondary recommendation that we request there, which is that we would like the board to approve delegation of authority to staff to select the funding recipients that would be used in those prepaid transactions, specifically any of those completed with Goldman, Morgan Stanley, or JP Morgan. And for context, the RBC parent bank will serve as the funding recipient for any transactions that we were to complete with them. So that's why they're left off of that short list. All right, let's go to our background. So I'm going to skip over the first 3 bullets here, which kind of just catches up to what we talked about last time. We have done several prepays. We've locked in 361 million of energy cost savings over the next 8 years, which is really great. And we would love to do some more. So last time we kind of dove into our portfolio of contracts that are available to put into prepays, kind of previewed our recommendation that we would be requesting approval for up to 4.5 billion of prepaid transactions. Since we had that meeting last month, the board approved service contracts with MCM and with Chapman and Cutler, basically to help us prepare and execute up to 4 future CPA prepaid transactions. And then last week, we met with the executive committee to provide them with an overview of our planned approach for these prepaid transactions, and they provided their broad support for our approach. Next slide, please. So this is going to be very similar to how we approached things last year, but we are planning a kind of a 2-step approach to execute these future prepaid transactions. So the first step of that 2-step is to get board authority to adopt a resolution with each of the, basically authorizing us to transact with each of those 4 underwriters and prepaid suppliers. It lays out the pro forma contracts that we would use to transact with each of them. And it lays out certain transaction criteria that must be satisfied in order for staff to go ahead and execute a deal. The second step is that before we go out and then do each prepay transaction, we issue a solicitation to get refreshed pricing from the 4 underwriters and prepaid suppliers. That basically gives us the latest and greatest view of what market rates are like, what their various structures are offering in terms of cost savings. And from there, we identify the best partner with whom to transact. So we kind of do a mini solicitation in advance of each prepay transaction until we would exhaust our 4.5 billion of total authorization. We used this approach last year, and we find that there are several benefits that are created by authorizing multiple transactions and counterparties at once. So first is it provides additional security that CPA is going to get the best available pricing and terms from this slate of partners who are the most experienced and well-regarded banks in the prepay space. Second is that it grants us a lot of flexibility to transact expeditiously when market conditions are favorable. I think as we discussed last time, there are periods of time when the market is not conducive to prepay, and it can be kind of shut down for new issuances for months at a time. There are other times that are really favorable, which is actually the period, well, demonstrated well by what we saw last year, where we realized significant savings. And we can actually kick to the next slide just to kind of continue that thought. So here's an overview of all of the prepaid bonds that have been completed by CCA since 2021. CPA has issued about 26% of that $22 billion total. We executed 3 prepaid deals in 5 months last year between August and December. And what you can see in the chart is that we achieved the highest average annual dollar savings among our CCA peer group. So some of that is the fortune of the market. We had, really supportive rates on the days that we actually went through and executed. But we think a good portion of that as well is, inducing continued competition among our bank partners to continue offering the best prices, the lowest fees, et cetera. All right, let's do our next slide. So a bit more detail on how we went about selecting the 4 banks. So dating back to August, we ran a solicitation process to identify underwriters and prepaid suppliers who would be qualified and experienced enough to work with us. We received bids from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, Royal Bank of Canada, all 3 of whom we worked with last year, as well as JP Morgan. These banks all of what we're looking for in terms of being qualified and experienced in the space. So Goldman, Morgan Stanley, and RBC are the top 3 issuers of prepaid bonds over the last 5 years, and collectively have issued over 80% of all prepaid bonds completed in that period. And as I mentioned, the board authorized us to transact with each of those 3 banks last year for our last slate of prepays. JPM, who is the additional party we want to add, has underwritten 6 gas prepay transactions since 2020 and have done a lot of hiring over the past 12 to 18 months to bring on staff who are experienced in completing electric prepay transactions. Kind of furthering the point that we had last year, we think it provides a lot of benefits from us to have a lot of providers in this space and to keep them in competition with each other. It helps drive innovation. So adding a 4th bank here we view as a very positive step forward in our path to a maturing prepay market. Let's do our next slide. So to quickly summarize the proposed board action that your recommendations would support, we'll be requesting the board adopt 4 resolutions that are going to cover the following approvals and authorizations for each of the 4 banks that we want to work with. So the first is defining the parameters that have to be satisfied in order for staff to go ahead and execute a prepaid transaction. So this is clarifying the bonds are limited obligations of triple CFA. They're not direct obligations of CPA. That's kind of table stakes for prepays, but is an important protective factor for us. Kind of putting a cap so that CPA will complete no more than 4.5 billion of transactions in total. We then have a per transaction cap, which says, each individual transaction will not exceed 1.5 billion size. The second piece clarifies that setting a kind of monthly minimum discount, CPA effectively achieving enough savings to make it worth it, we feel, to go ahead and do a deal, is setting that minimum at 5% of our cash flows. Lastly, on the cost front, making sure that our total cost of issuance shall not exceed 1.25% of the amount of bond proceeds. This is essentially how much all of the various service providers that help us execute a deal, mostly lawyers, it's a lot of lawyers, can get compensated from out of it. And then lastly, kind of an end date on this. We're seeking authorization to complete transactions, and we don't want to ask the board for, a blanket authority to do these out into the future. So we've set an end date of June 30th of 2027. So effectively 18 months from now. The second major approval here is for us to execute proposed documents or form of documents with each of the banks. So basically saying, hey, here's the form of the contracts. We can't populate quite all of the details yet, but they will follow this form and these important terms, providing good visibility to our board members as to what we're going to be agreeing to. And then the third is providing direction to Triple CFA to make payments of the prepaid bond proceeds in the event of a successful transaction to compensate our service providers for all of the activities they perform to make the bond transaction successful. These resolutions are going to look very similar to what the board approved in July of last year to support what was ultimately our third, fourth, and fifth prepay transactions. Let's do our next slide. Quick recap of the timeline. So we are here now with the fourth bullet, requesting your recommendation to the board to approve these additional prepay transactions. Our intent is that that's followed by presenting to the board next week, seeking those resolutions. And then in November 13th, actually, resolutions will go before Triple CFA's board to basically authorize us to move forward with prepay transactions. So two-step process there. Since Triple CFA is the one who actually issues the bonds, we need their board to, demonstrate their comfort and approval for us to go forward and transact. And I think that brings us right back around to our recommendation slide at the end, which I feel I've repeated several times so far. So I won't belabor the point, but we'll love to turn it back over to the committee for any questions or feedback they'd like to offer.
I'd like to make a comment. This is Ed Albrecht on the Triple CFA. I'm a little new to this, but to me it seems like a terrific organization, really to moderate the process. In a sense, I feel like they're a third-party administrator. They're taking the leverage and the risk off our back to make the transaction complete, not only proceed with it, but also distribute it. It's a win-win, and the price seems to be reasonable. Is there any other second choice besides the Triple CFA that we would decide between one or the other or more, or is that the only one?
That's a great question. So this actually rewinds us a couple of years before we started doing prepay bonds. So in order to issue these, you effectively need this type of conduit issuer who, take the prepaid debt on their balance sheet. They administer the programs, but are a separate party to this us or the other CCAs that are ultimately the beneficiaries of it. There are a few other options for that conduit issuer. We explored a few of those alternative candidates a few years ago before we joined Triple CFA. I think at this point, since we are a member of Triple CFA, Ted actually serves as the head of their board of directors right now. There are a lot of benefits to continuing to stick with them. I think in terms of, synergies, ease of communication. We have relationships with their working staff who are really all members of other CCAs. So I think we're pretty well set up to continue with them. But you are correct that there is a larger galaxy, not a very large galaxy, but a larger galaxy of conduit issuers who do these sorts of things.
I would make a recommendation from a fiduciary standpoint, and for us to make a intelligent decision to, in the future, really maybe have an amendment here where we'll see the other parties that provide the same service and what their costs are. So sometimes it's not a cost-driven product. Sometimes the higher the cost, the better the service. And in this case, that would be something we would lean toward. But it'd be nice to know who the other ones are, just to have it so we can make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I see Director Newman has his hand raised.
I do. Thank you, Kate, for your presentation. And I'm fine with the recommendations as is. I do have a Math 101 question, just so I understand the bond issuance history. In your third slide, and we've heard this multiple times before, CPA has issued close to $6 billion in 23 and 24. I think it states it's $5.9 billion in prepaid bonds. And then a couple of slides later on slide 5, there's a statement, there's a chart for all CCAs overall saying 22.2 billion, of which CPA makes up 26% of that total issuance. So 26% of that is actually a little less than 5.9. It's about 5.8, 5.7 billion. So are we measuring different things? Is this a rounding error, or am I missing something altogether?
No, this is a good question. My guess is what's happened there is that there's continued to be some CCC issuance activity since we first put these slides together. I think it may have been.
I'm puzzled because the time period in the slide 5 is longer. It's a longer period. It starts at 2021 and goes through 2025. So if anything, I would expect any delta between the two to go the other way.
Yeah, I think I follow you. I should double check this number. Let's see. You said the 26.
I mean, it could be we're underreporting CPA part of that, or it could be a rounding error. I'm not sure.
I think it's at the level of rounding error, but we can follow up and confirm that. And we will have this same slide in our board presentation. I certainly want to make sure that number is correct.
Yeah, I mean, what's 100 million between friends, but.
So inclusive of even the latest triple CFA transaction, which actually just priced last week, I have us at 25.6% in terms of par amount that CPA has issued versus the other members. If you left that out, we were at 26.6%, which I think is probably where we rounded down instead of up.
Gotcha.
So.
Yeah, a number above 26% would agree with that 5.9 billion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
so that could be
the full
it.
board will pull it out to a decimal.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
As I said, this is just Math 101 stuff. I support the concept. I think these prepays have worked very well for CPA over the past few years, and I'm very pleased to see that continue. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Are there any other questions from the field?
I just have one. We've had a request to look at alternate providers other than triple CFA. And we've had a suggestion that we approve this resolution as it stands. Would it make sense to go ahead and approve this as it stands and then look at the field of possibly alternate providers in the future? I'm just not sure where we stand on those two perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we would recommend to proceed with the resolution as written right now. I guess there's sort of two angles to look at potential conduit issuers. So first would be kind of like operational and strategic benefits. You know, are they easy to work with? Do we have an existing relationship with them? Do we understand all the approvals they need? And I would say Triple CFA as our incumbent has a clear lead there. The second piece is whether or not there's any financial benefits. So I would say Triple CFA has quite low fees for this. And I recall that 2 years ago, or I guess 3 years ago now, when we looked into this, they had either fees in line with or lower than the other conduit issuers we had looked at. And I think that remains the case today with even lower fees now that they've kind of gotten up and going as an ongoing concern. Their operating expenses on an annual basis are lower than they were at the time that we joined them. And I think the per transaction fee that Triple CFA charges us to kind of facilitate all of this is something on the order of $25,000, which against $1 billion or $1.5 billion transaction is de minimis. So I think we could query around and see what other conduit issuers offer in terms of fees, but I think it would be tough for them to beat that.
Yeah, I'll just add, I think we can look at we as Kate mentioned, we have looked at alternatives. We did so before we did our first prepaid transactions. We could take another look at that. Just for additional context, prepaid bonds are very unusual. They're really only the only issuers of prepaid bonds are gas and electric, publicly owned gas and electric utilities, such as CPA. And so the available, there's a few different conduits that are currently available. One serves the municipal electric utilities who have in the past done prepaid transactions. And the fees that they wanted to charge CCAs were significant, like order of magnitude higher than the fees that we ultimately pay through Triple CFA. And that was really those high fees were the impetus to create Triple CFA. Interestingly, our primary point of contact was the head finance guy at Sacramento Municipal Utility District, who essentially was the general manager of that conduit issuer. He's now become the CFO of a CCA in Northern California. So we've lost that contact. I'm not sure who the current contact over there would be. The other conduit issuer that we could potentially use would be the Southern California Public Power Authority. Which is SCAPA, but in order to use SCAPA, you have to be a member of SCAPA, and we're not eligible to be a member of SCAPA as a CCA. So we actually don't really have that many options, but there's for context. But I think it's perfectly reasonable for us to take another look out into the field and see what's available. I think that staff would need more time to do that. So my hope would be that maybe for the next round of prepays rather than this round of prepays, we would be tasked with that project.
David, Ed again, want to weigh in a little bit on this. Thank you for all that information. It's very, very helpful. And this is not one of those, I mean, I feel anyway, decisions. Certainly we can look into this. It takes time to learn a little bit about staff time and otherwise to do your homework on it. But just about Triple CFA, what business are they in? Is this their primary business, or are there other elected businesses that support it?
The only business of Triple CFA is acting as a conduit issuer for CCA's prepaid transactions. That's all it does. The board members of Triple CFA are CEOs for the most part of CCAs. They're CEOs or chief operating officers. And then the working group, which is kind of its staff, if you will, for Triple CFA are the CFOs of the CCAs.
How long
I'm
has it been
a
around?
member of the Triple CFA working group. So it really is operated by and for us, although it is, legally a separate entity.
How long have they been in business?
Since 2021, when the first prepays were issued.
Very good. Thank you. It's all good to know.
And Ed, if you ever want more detail about Triple CFA, I do serve as the board chair of the organization. And one of the things I do is make sure that the organization continues to be focused on serving its members and keeping costs low.
Good to know. Good to know.
Okay. Any more discussion?
Madam Chair, I'll move recommendation A and B.
Second.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I have a motion by Committee Member Kalaikai and a second by Committee Member Zuckerman to approve item number 6. Chair Santangelo,
Yes.
Committee Member Albrecht,
Yes.
Committee Member Kalaikai,
Yes.
Committee Member Zuckerman,
Yes.
and Committee Member Newman.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Motion passes.
Great. Thank you.
Well, thank you
Okay.
all.
That brings us to committee member comments. Does anybody have any more comments? Seeing none, that'll bring us to adjourn and the next meeting date to be determined, I see.
Yeah, we will not make you meet the day before Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ted.
And so
We appreciate that.
we're looking into December and the need to have a meeting in December or not make you meet the day before Christmas.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Great meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Time is 12:03.
Take care now.